Okay, on to varnishing. So I'm going to walk you through the processes I take for doing some varnishing work. I'm going to start by, first of all, dusting off my paintings. Of course, these are completely dry. These have had just one oiling out layer, like I've shown you in the previous video. This one needed two to really pick up some of the sort of sunken in areas. I'm going to give everything a very quick dust, and then I'm going to take them off my surface. Next, I want to give the area that I'm working a little clean, making sure that there is nothing on here. And then I'm going to take some paper towels for the area that I'll be varnishing on. I want to make sure, and these are the shop towels, so they are lint free. They're absolutely great for doing anything like this. So that's going to cover my biggest area, and I'm going to take some tape now and tape that down. That's going to give me a nice clean surface to be working from. I usually do these in batches as well. The next thing I want to do is take one of these lint rollers and go over the painting. Even though I've dusted it off, I want to just very lightly go over everything again to make sure that there's no debris or anything on the surface of the painting. You can see, even though we've given that a dust, you can see things still coming off. I always use a clean, I don't know if you can see that, but I always will use a clean lint roller. So when I'm doing the next one, I'll remove this and use a clean one. I'm just going to put that to one side as I continue working on this one. Now, I've used all sorts of varnishes over the years, but I have finally settled on the Gamvar varnish. This can be used once your painting is touch dry, because it is breathable, and it will still allow your painting to cure over the months. It doesn't sort of harden like a normal varnish. So this is safe to use. You do not have to wait the traditional 6 to 12 months like you can do with oil paints. What they recommend you do is the thickest part of your painting is just either press it with your thumbnail to make sure that that's dry to the touch. Once your painting is dry to the touch, you are safe to use the varnish. The varnish comes in gloss, satin. You can buy it in satin, and you can buy it in matte. You can also, they're also intermixable. So if you wanted, instead of just buying the satin, if you wanted, you could mix the gloss and the matte in whatever ratio you want. They work perfectly well together in whatever ratio you want. So let's say you wanted 80% gloss and just a little bit of matte if you felt like the satin wasn't glossy enough, and so on. So you can mix these two and create your own, and I've done that here. Again, I've played around with it and done that here. Now, regardless of which one you're choosing, the number one thing you have to do, and I'm going to use my pre-mixed satin here, which I think has got about 60% of the gloss and 40% of the matte. So I've got a mix in there that's just not quite a perfect satin. The satin is like a 50-50 split. So again, you can personalize this to your own preference. Now, regardless of which one you use, whether it's the gloss, the satin, or the matte, but specifically more so for the satin and the matte, you must shake these. You must give them a shake to activate the the matting agents that are in the varnish. You've got to shake them, and then give them a moment, and then give them a little gentle stirring in the bottle, and that will activate and mix all the matting agents. Even with the gloss one, you still want to give it a shake. Give it a second and then kind of just stir it, and then that's ready to go. You want to pour that. You never want to pour directly onto your painting. I have done it myself. I've done it because it looks very arty when you're doing social media posts, as you pour it on and spread it all out. But the correct way, and the way that Gambling recommend, I've gone on their site and watched all of the videos. The way they recommend is that you pour it into a separate container. So that's what I have here. I have this one which I keep nice and clean, and I just use it just for my varnishing, just to make sure that that is, I do wash it at the end of every session, so it's always kept clean, and I put a little plastic lid on that so it's always kept nice and clean. So again, I'm going to go with my, in fact, I'm going to go with the satin one, the gloss one. I feel like this one could definitely benefit. There are still some areas that are a little bit that haven't been covered by the oiling out, although I'm mostly there, and I think the rest of it will get picked up with the varnish. But again, it is super, super important. I can't stress enough. You've got to shake them, regardless of which one you choose. It's personal preference. I'm going to go with the gloss, give it a shake, give it a little stir. And I'm only going to pour out a tiny amount. You know, you do not want to pour it back into the bottle because you may be picking up debris from the painting or from the brush hairs. So once it's poured, you really just want to do a tiny bit. It's always easier to keep adding more rather than pouring this back when you're done. So you can see I've only put the tiniest amount in there. Gamvar recommend that you do thin, very thin coats. Onto the brush. Now I've already, to the side, I've already made sure I've checked that there's no dust or anything on this brush. I've given it a good clean, and of course I clean it at the end of every session as well. So this is always ready to go. This is the brush that they recommend. I have tried lots of other brushes, but I do love this one, so to me it's been worth the extra cost. They do a slightly larger version of this, but I'm finding this seems to be a perfect size for what I need. So on to the varnishing, the tiniest amount, and I'm going to just dip that all over. You can see how little I have actually used. And then I am going to very carefully work that in. It is much better to put thin coats on, working that into the painting, than to put heavy coats on. Turning that around so that I'm getting the light from the window so I can see exactly where I've been. Now I want to be tipping that around now. So hopefully you can see I've still even got a little bit of that left in there. I've used that little on there. So again, I'm going to just check now that everything is as covered as I need it to be. And you are better off doing 2 to 3, usually 2. I've found if you're doing the oiling out session, then 2 coats of the varnish is usually okay, but it will depend on the surfaces that you're using as well. So I'm looking at that and everything looks great. So now I want to very lightly go back and forth to really smooth things out. I'm hardly putting any pressure on here. I'm even holding it with just 2 fingers so you can see I'm really just letting that brush smooth the surface a couple of times. Now this is usually dry within 24 hours, so you'd be able to get another coat on. But just in case, sometimes you may need to leave it 48 hours. But for me, usually they have been dry overnight. Very importantly, you do not want to get anything on your painting during this drying stage. You've spent all that time preparing. You can see how beautiful that looks with the varnish and how it really makes everything finished off. But you don't want anything to fall on that. So my solution for that is using these plastic tubs. So I'm going to pop that in here now and pop the lid on. So that's now safely, I'm going to leave that on the counter or underneath a cabinet to dry, and nothing's going to get on that. I've got a couple of these. I bought them from Dutton. You can get a pack of 3 for about, a set of 3 for about £27, and that's where I've got these from. And for those of you in the UK, just Google these storage boxes. So I'm going to repeat now on the German Shepherd and on the cat, so you can watch the whole process again, and I'll be stacking those in a container as well. In this video, I'm varnishing 3 completed pieces from my intermediate pet portrait course over at MazArt Academy. But if you're just starting out, there's also a full beginner's pet portrait course available too. Both are filmed in real time, so you can paint along step by step at your own pace. If you'd like to learn any of these techniques and create your own pet portraits, you can join me anytime over at the MazArt Academy, and I'll leave a link for that in the description box below. So that is all 3 of my paintings all stored ready for drying, and of course I will leave those to dry at least 24 hours, occasionally 48. It depends on, you know, humidity and lots of other factors that will depend on the drying time. I know nothing's going to get on that, no cat hairs or dog hairs or bits of fluff in the atmosphere. So they're nice and secure in there. Once you've checked them and they're nice and dry, you just simply repeat this entire process until you've got the desired finish that you want. Typically for me, I need 2 coats of varnish. That usually does the trick for me. So I shall be storing these under a counter or on top of a counter out of the way until they're completely dry. The next stage of the process is cleaning up. These sheets here, I'll simply reuse them over on my cleaning station when I'm painting. They don't get thrown away. But what I'm going to do with this here, we don't tip this back. Usually I like to try and use it up on other paintings as best I possibly can. But if not, I'm just going to simply just wipe that out. And then I'm going to pop over to the sink now and clean this brush and my container and make sure everything is ready for my next varnishing session. Okay, over to my studio sink now, and I'm going to be using the Masters brush cleaner for cleaning this varnishing brush. Inside of this, I buy these very large ones and I put one of these lovely silicone sponges in here. I want to run the water so that it's warm, not hot. And I'm going to begin by first of all rubbing the brush, and this will sort of loosen up any of that varnish. Run the brush over the soap. Give that a good working through. My water's nice and warm now, so I'm going to just run the cold as well so they don't get too hot. Rinse that off. And then I'll do that again into the soap. And this time I'm also going to rub it against the silicone sponge. Again, rinse that off, and then I'll dry that and lay that flat for complete drying, ready for the next time. My container also gets washed as well, and for that I simply get the soap and kind of scrub inside and make sure that is also nice and clean. Again, drying that off with a lint-free cloth. And again, I'll dry that again with a clean paper towel. That's all good to go again for the next time. And again, I'll just make sure that this one is also nicely dry. And I'll store that away ready for the next time, reshaping it and store that away ready for next time. This should last you a lifetime, so it is worth going out and getting the right brush. It really is the perfect brush for doing varnishing with. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. So I really do hope you found this tutorial helpful and it's given you some useful tips on how to approach varnishing for your oil paintings. Just as a side note as well, I also use this same procedure for acrylic paintings as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.